Oh no, North Carolina is losing all these games. The sky is falling. The entire roster is going to transfer. Hang on. Let's just pump the brakes a little bit.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I'd like to welcome you into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I am your host, Isaac Schade, and joining us today is our guy Jason Jordan, our college basketball recruiting insider here on the Locked On Network. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk about Jackson Keith, a 2025 recruit. Wow, we're getting out there, Jason. It means we're old. But before we get there, I joked about it off the top, and it seems that people think the sky is falling right now. And so we're going to get into that. But first, let me remind you that our recruiting segments with Jason Jordan are always brought to us by LinkedIn Jobs, the official college basketball recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Network. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job free right now at linkedin.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Jason, okay. Here's the thing. A month ago, you and I had this conversation. North Carolina's not off to a great start this season. Is it going to affect recruiting? Well, as we look back, what has happened since then? They got a commitment from a guy named James Brown. They got a commitment from a guy named Elliot Cadeau, and they got a commitment from a guy named Ian Jackson, just one of the highest rated commits in North Carolina recruiting history. So has it affected recruiting? I think it's safe to say that it has not. But now what has been popping up after Carolina is currently in a streak of having lost 4 out of their last 5. I'm seeing and hearing and getting texts and all this stuff in this vein. Oh, everything's lost. Coach Davis can't coach. And you know what? When this season's over, Seth Trimble's going to transfer. Jalen Washington's going to transfer. DeMarco Dunn's going to transfer. And Puff Johnson's going to transfer. And there's not going to be a roster except for, I guess, Zayden High and Simeon Wilcher. They'll be the only 2 players. Like that's if I trusted everything that I've heard from the Tar Heel community right now, that's what next year would be. Can you help me stem the tide and just help people feel a little better about re-recruiting the roster?
Yeah, I think, definitely pump your brakes on that. That sounds like an emotional response. I don't know any fans that have emotional responses. So I think they're all really logical, level-headed people. So I know those aren't fans that you're talking about. No, I'm joking. That sounds like fans. That sounds like what they said last year before you guys won a couple games in March. They were ready to send Hubert on an ambulance ride, if I remember correctly. So I think, everybody's got to relax. You got to relax, as Noriega would say. You got to relax. And I think it does 4 out of 5. It's magnified because you're losing. The reality is, if they were 5 out of the last 5 and the bench was getting the same minutes or even less, nobody would care. And that wouldn't even be a storyline. I'd be like, but they're part of something bigger than themselves. It's all about spin. They're part of something bigger than themselves. They see that when it's their turn, they're going to have great success in this system, and they're going to get all the brunt of the minutes, and they're just waiting their turn to get there. But see, that's not working. Now, they're losing. At the end of the day, it's not working right now. But I mean, you got to weather the storm. It just happened last year. Like that's what I don't understand about fans. Like, what's the logic? It's like, will they say that last year was a fluke and they knew it all along and Hubert can't coach? And, if he got it right, if he righted the ship last year, I would give him a little bit of, faith. And,
let's get some leeway. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, he was an injury away from winning the national title. I think Brady Manek still has a concussion. Big boy. I think we got to remember that. And that's not something to just sneeze at or gloss over. It's like, no, he could have won he could have gone to the Sweet 16, not the Final Four. He should have won the national title. He's a heck of a coach, heck of a recruiter, and I would put a lot of faith in him.
And here's the thing for me. I think it's about when people make these comments, I think it's just based on, like you said, emotion, but also assumption. Like, I think that because of the era we're in with the transfer portal, and you and I talk about this often, but I think there's just this, as people assume that therefore anything that goes wrong for any player, they're out. Like Tyler Nichol to me is a great example of this. Has not gotten a ton of playing time this year, has had spot minutes here and there. But if you listen to Tyler himself, if you hear him talk, if you listen to interviews he's given, he understands his role on this team this year. And not only is he okay with it, but he values it. Does he wish he was getting more playing time? Absolutely. You and I would as well. But he understands that he's here this year to learn and to train and to grow. And he knows that his time is coming next year. Right? I mean, like, is it crazy to feel that way?
No, not at all. I mean, that said, because of the rule change, I think people got to remember the other side is with the rule, with the rule change and then being able to go to another campus and play immediately. That's also, lingering in the back of people's minds. That's fair,
Very fair.
I do think, to your point, the prospects of having an enhanced role at a place like North Carolina is a harder sell than, going to a maybe a lower level, and maybe not lower level, school and having an enhanced role. I think at the end of the day, North Carolina is North Carolina, and people know that if they could have some degree of success here, that could bode well for their futuristic plans. So I'll say this, a lot of times you got to remember, parents don't become reasonable when they get to college. I know AAU parents, so they don't become reasonable when they get to college. If their kids are facing adversity, he's not these kids. I'm just saying, for generally speaking,
Sure,
let's say
sure.
the kids are calling home like, yeah, man, I don't want to be here. I mean, I hear that a lot, all the time. I'm talking about in the 2022 class, not at North Carolina. I can't say that I'm North Carolina, but let's just say Power 5 schools. I hear that a lot from parents, and we're leaving. I'm telling you, if it really, a lot of that is just emotion, but some of it's not. Some of those guys really went through with the transfer last year. And I would say, I would put it at about 50-50 of the people that I talked to, and I talked to a lot of people. So, and then I've had people be like, I'll never talk to this coach again. He did my son wrong. He's not playing. He can't call me. I blocked him. I'm being serious. These are real quotes.
I know. I believe you. It's just so wild.
The kid is still there.
Yeah.
And the kid this year is like, will run through 10 brick walls for the guy head first, the coach head first. So it's just, we really do have to wait and see. Like I know people that are like, yo, I'm telling you, man, you can go ahead and put the word out. Cause I'm like, hey man, you got to relax. You don't want to even back channel conversation that, because the reality is give it a month, let it marinate, see how things go. And now I'll say this, if they're still losing, and let's just say worst case scenario, they don't make the tournament, I could see some people jumping ship, but that's going to happen at every campus, not just y'all. I mean,
yes.
It's going to happen down the street. Rob, if it's the same scenario, it'll happen 8 miles down the street too. Yep. So it does. It's everything is magnified when you're losing, and that's why we got to start winning. You got to start winning.
And I think your point that you just made there, Jason, is a great one. In this era, yes, you are going to have transfers. Like just about like that's the reality of probably all.
It's not even a knock. That's not even a knock anymore.
No, it's just what we do. It is the landscape now of this game for all 363 Division I teams. Right. And so, yes, Carolina will have a transfer or 2 or 3 or maybe more, but that is not necessarily as a result of wins and losses, but more a function of the reality of the world and the context we live in as people who cover college basketball. And so I think that is the bigger point that I want to hammer home, that the sky is not falling. People don't hate Hubert Davis. People just are looking for their opportunities. Some will stay. Some will have the level-headedness to say, I'm here. Well, and that also, by saying that, I'm indicating that somebody that leaves isn't level-headed, and that's not true either.
Right.
But just remember, folks, this is where we're at today and right now. Well, we want to talk about somebody that might come and be a future Tar Heel. His name is Jackson Keith, and we're going to talk about him in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We are at the midway point of the NBA season, and it is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers, you get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. All you got to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, it's secure, and it's super easy to use. And then you can bet on anything from the money line to point scores and three-pointers drained. I've got Giannis on my fantasy team, and so I'm over here taking the over on his player prop scoring line all week long because that does good for me as well. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at an even bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we are joined today, as we often are, by our guy, Jason Jordan, Locked On's college basketball recruiting insider. And you might be thinking, folks, why on earth are we talking about a kid that's a sophomore in high school right now, class of 2025? Well, I'll give you two reasons why, and then we want to talk about this guy specifically with Jason. Number one, Carolina's already done their work in the class of 2024. This class is essentially signed, sealed, and delivered. Obviously, they still got to sign. So I guess by definition of what I just said, I'm wrong. But you hear my point. And, there might be one more to slot in. But outside of that, this coaching staff can go ahead and turn their attention to the class of 2025. Moreover, in this era, you want to go ahead and get ahead on these guys and reach out to them. Carolina already has one scholarship offer out in the class of 2025. And so no reason not to start in early with these guys. So Jackson Keith, a local North Carolina product. Jason Jordan, I know you like Mr. Jackson Keith, and I want you to tell me why.
Yeah, he plays for my guys at Team Loaded, in Virginia. So they rave about him. They were Team Loaded on the Adidas 3SSB, and 6'5", he goes about 6'5", 6'6", but he's just a worker, makes things happen from the wing, gets to his spots really well. 3-level score, I think he definitely needs to improve his perimeter jump, but I would say that's the weakest part of his offensive game. But getting to the mid-range, he has an awareness to know when to stop and pull up or stop and shoot the floater. He can get into the paint and make things happen for his teammates. He's very active, always jumping for the tap-ins and keeping rebounds alive, and just a great two-way player too. So he can lock up the other team's best defensive player, and he has that desire to do that and hunger and that motor for it. So great, intriguing young prospect. Definitely a guy I'll be watching this spring and summer.
I feel like we've heard a lot of that two-way player designation from a lot of the guys that Hubert Davis recruits. We see it in guys currently on the roster like Leaky Black, who would probably be more only on the defensive side, although he's had some good offensive games lately. But same would be true of Seth Trimble. But we know that about Drake Powell, who's coming in next year, or 2 years from now. Why is that, do you think, such a priority for Hubert Davis?
I think because he'll be he sees the success he's had with Leaky, right? And I think, be honest with you, I think younger guys look at guys like Leaky and say, hey, look at this guy's like potentially the most valuable player on the court a lot of times. Do
you mean that from an NBA standpoint? Or just like in the college? Or do you mean that just like in the college game?
In the college game, I'd say, because I don't know that Leaky's an NBA player.
Sure.
But I'll say that, you can be more, you can have a great deal of success. The reality is most guys look at basketball and they're like, okay, I'm gonna get 10 shots, and I'll knock down 3, and then I'll get to the rim, shoot some free throws, and I'll get my 15 points. But it's not like the way that Leaky impacts the game from a defensive standpoint. To be very honest, coming out of high school, I never thought Leaky had a chance, respectfully, at a pro career. Like I wasn't high on him like that. I mean, he had, but because he kind of faded off. Everybody was calling him the second coming. If people remember this early on, like in the 10th grade, and then it kind of faded down and stuff like that. And so I watched him a lot. I was never like sold on that, but he's really I loved his growth, and I loved his his commitment on the defensive end, and his awareness, his ability to make plays, the way he impacts the game off the stats, all that stuff, man. And so that's why he's such a fan favorite there. He walks on water there in Chapel Hill. And I think guys look at stuff like that. I think they like to be they want to be like college legends too. Everybody's not going to the NBA. And the more I talk to kids, the more they realize that. You'll be surprised. I'm not saying by and large, but I hear it more, which is refreshing. And so to know that I know that that's Hubert's sell too. I look at a guy like Leaky Black, he's giving himself the best chance. If he's going to the NBA, he's giving him, he is not leaving an ounce in the chamber. He's firing all bullets. And I think that's a message that can, catch on with a lot of players like Jackson.
But because of the nature of AAU, where it feels like just such a highlight showcase so many times, is that part of why we see kind of a delayed understanding of the importance of defense?
Yeah, but you have some, you have some programs like Team Takeover. That's a system, like Keith Stevens does an amazing job. If you come to Takeover, you're going to average, it's like Carolina, you average 10 points, 8 points, but you are going to play defense. And that's why they're so successful. But yeah, by and large, that is definitely the exception, which makes me want to call. That is definitely the exception and not the rule. And so, yeah, to your point, there's not a premium on, defensive rotation, defensive schemes and nuances in that regard. So no, yeah, I think that definitely affects it.
Do you think these high school players start to catch on to the fact of like something I talk a lot about, particularly with Leaky, for example, against Clemson on Saturday, where he's guarding Hunter Tyson, and this young man who averages 16 points a game, Leaky holds him to 2. And so like that 14 points under his average is essentially just as good as Leaky scoring 14 points over his average. Is that kind of mindset, that thought process, something that you see often in a high school product?
No, that's not something you hear a lot of. Like that, I've heard it, but it's very rare. Like, I know I had 30, but my man had 28, so I really had 2. Nah, I had 30 though, and we won, so I don't care. He had 20. It's like that. Or I had 30 and we lost, but I had 30. I should have had more help. I hear that, so it's not, I'm sorry to say, the trend, the mindset is not changing quick enough for me personally. So, yeah.
All right, that's great. Well, we want to talk more about Jackson Keith, a few of his strengths, a few things Jason thinks he still needs to grow in, who are potential other suitors in addition to North Carolina. We'll unpack all of that in just a second. Okay, so Jason, I want to get back in specifically to diving in more on Jackson Keith. That was a fun kind of conversation we just had about kind of a two-way player and why that's so important. But I want to know, like, if you could name like 2 things that you think right now make Jackson Keith capable of stepping onto a college court, or things that you see like, hey, if this continues on the trajectory as it is right now, this would make him a high Division I product as long as he keeps that going for these last couple of years of high school. What would that be in terms of strengths?
I would say his motor for sure on both ends of the floor at his size. Because you can't coach a guy to be 6'6", but he can handle the ball and get, his motor gets in places, and he's long too. So I would say that's one. And then secondly, just his ability to slash and get into the lane, and his awareness to not say, "Hi, I'm in the lane. That means I got to shoot. I'm here close enough. I see that you're open, but no, it's about me." No, he'll pass it, and he'll pass in the middle of the lane. I've seen it multiple times. Like, he makes the right basketball play. And so those 2 things are the things that would stand out to me on the pro side for sure.
And that tells me also, in addition to motor, just that I always love when I hear that phrase, he makes the right basketball play.
Yeah.
Because that
Yeah.
says a lot to me about the thing that he's got between his ears,
Sure.
of someone who can recognize this and do what is called upon, especially as a sophomore, to have that type of recognition. Is that a fair assessment you would say about Jackson Keith as well?
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about the logical progression we're basically talking about. That bodes well for him futuristically. So that makes me feel like he's going to ascend even more this spring and summer.
Love to hear that. All right, we've already talked. You mentioned you'd like to see more, like in terms of being a 3-level scorer, that his perimeter shot still needs some work.
Yeah.
Outside of that, are there other things you would add to that? That's like, man, over the course of these next 3 years before he gets to college, here's a couple things I'd really like to see growth in his game.
Yeah, I always say with wing guys and guards, backcourt guys, defensive awareness, that's never not true, right? Especially with a younger guy. But ball handling, he could tighten that up a little bit more. But it's really the 3-point shot. I feel like if he gets, if he's shooting it at a higher clip there, it's going to open the world up for him. And he's just going to be impossible to guard if he can get to high 30s consistently. So we'll see this summer, because he's definitely going to have a lot of competition in that DS3 SSB, which I'm sure he'll be at the highest level there.
To you, at least at this point, based on height and skill set, does he mostly project as a 3?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. Just because he's not stroking it. He's not stroking it consistently, and he's not as lethal a threat. I wouldn't say. I'm not saying he can't throw a rock in a lake. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, they're going to probably sag off him over the course of a game and say, hey, look, man, you getting to the cup. And, you ain't doing that other thing real well. So I'm gonna take my chances on you on that 3-point shot. Even set. I've seen people sag off him a little bit. So definitely would say a 3.
Yeah. Well, that is bad news to North Carolina fans' ears right now, because they're sick and tired of seeing defenses sag down on Mondo and daring others to shoot. And so I think it would make Carolina folks happy if Jackson Keith can indeed improve that percentage over the next couple of years.
He's got a little time. He's got
some time. We got plenty of time on that. But yeah, particularly at that 3 and that stretch 4 position. Yeah. Well, Jason, in terms of his actual recruitment, in addition to North Carolina, who are some of the other suitors that folks should be aware of?
I've heard NC State with him deeply tied to him, Tennessee. I've heard, I think even Wake Forest, but it's so early, those are 3 that I have heard more than 3 or 4 times. I think he's actually taken a visit to a couple of those guys. So, but I expect the spring and summer. I mean, our conversation in the spring and summer probably will be a lot different, especially after the first live period. So I think that's April 9th-ish, around that window. So I expect that to be that list to expand substantially by that time.
And then there's that, what is that date in like mid-June or whenever it is when you can start really contacting upcoming juniors, which I would imagine his phone's going to be ringing off the hook at that point.
Yeah, that's June 15th is when the coaches at midnight, and they actually do call it midnight.
And they call it midnight, that's right.
They do. So I imagine his phone is going to be off the hook. I did a lot of stories on kids taking naps to get ready for that midnight call session and going into 6 a.m. So
yeah, that'll be fun. We'll have to have a good conversation about that.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Man, you love to see all of that. So another thing about Team Loaded and Jackson Keith is obviously we know that a notable alumnus of that program is on the current roster. Jason, in what you typically see, and I mean, I know there's guys coming from all different programs and going to different places, but what, if any, level of recruiting? I mean, we know, and forgive me, I haven't said the name. It's Armando that we're talking about. And we know Armando to be a guy that no bones about it. I'm just getting out there and recruiting, talking to guys. And so what level of impact does that have, talking to alums of the fellow AAU roster?
Well, Tyler Nichol played for Team Loaded. I think Mondo played for Keith Stevens.
That's right.
Yeah. So,
yep.
But Tyler Nichol played and then there's some similarities there. But there's differences too because Tyler Nichol was knocking that thing down. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, definitely he'll be able to. It's about relationships. So Carolina obviously has a very close relationship with the team loaded staff because of Tyler Nichol. I mean, it was only enhanced with Tyler Nichol. So they'll be able to. And to your point earlier, he has a good, he has his head on right. He knows that his time is going to come. And, you hope that in the back channel conversations that they're singing the praises of the powder blue, because that stuff counts. That stuff really counts. And coaches know that. And so it's good. Let's say this. It's good that Tyler's saying the right things in public because, that usually means that they're being honest about, their mentality going forward. And that could bode well for a guy like Jackson for sure. If they're having Mac channel conversations, and I'm sure they are.
Okay. Great stuff there. Talking about Jackson Keith, who plays in Durham, North Carolina, but that doesn't mean too much about him being locked up. Duke, don't worry, folks, about that. Obviously, we will keep our eyes and ears on his recruitment going forward, and we'll have more conversations with Jason about that. He was at the game when Carolina hosted NC State a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that because coming up tomorrow's show, we preview Carolina in the return game, heading over to Raleigh to try to get back in the win column this weekend. That is it, friends, for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Big thanks, as always, to our guy, Jason Jordan, for joining us on the show today. You can follow us both on Twitter, me at Isaac Schade, Jason at Jason NC Jordan, and make sure to follow the show at Locked On Heels. Would love to hear from you. Been getting all sorts of great emails, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to send us recommendations for Heel of the Week and Heel of the Week. We'll get to those on Friday. Please subscribe to the show, smash that like button, and leave some comments. And for your next listen, please don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball, the brand new show on our network, hosted by myself, Andy Patton. Jason joins us on there as well. It's great stuff, bringing you everything you need to know on and off the court in the college basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and anywhere else you get podcasts. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with Jason and I talking about Carolina hoops. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll get with you back tomorrow, but until then, peace.